celebrate the festival of rugby that is the Six Nations. It's so ingrained in Welsh culture, it's almost part of our collective DNA. I'm Carolyn Hitt, and I've grown up loving this game. As a journalist, I've covered Welsh rugby for almost 20 years, and I admire and applaud the players who put their bodies on the line for our entertainment. OK, these days they're paid handsomely for it in multi-million-pound tournaments, but that wasn't always the case. For more than 100 years, rugby union was an amateur game. If you wanted to be paid to play, you had to switch codes and play rugby league. I'm going on a journey to learn why so many Welshmen left us to play a foreign game in a foreign land.
That's a bloody shame.
Obviously, when I went, I said the right things in the press that I needed a new challenge. That's bullshit. I just needed security for my family.
I'll hear stories of racism that still shock today.
I'd have loved to have played for Cardiff, and I'd dreamt of playing for Wales. A black man, a black boy is never going to play for Wales. Never.
I'll find out how shady agents enticed our boys to head north to the heartland of rugby league.
We find them, for instance, when they're just getting married, that's a good time because they want a house. It's usually a working class type of fella that shall I say, takes the bait or makes the right decision.
And I'll discover just what was at stake if you did decide to switch codes.
You'd be banished to hell, you'll never be forgiven.
This is the story of the Welsh Rugby League player, the Rugby Codebreakers. In the late 19th century, rugby was a new and exciting sport. And although increasingly a people's game, it was run by the public school-educated elite. The Rugby Football Union insisted it was strictly an amateur sport to be played for the love of the game and moral education. But in the north of England and in Wales, rugby was being played and enjoyed by largely working class men who were missing work to play, so needed to be paid. The classes were on a collision course. My journey to discover how rugby's civil war split one game into two codes begins in the north of England. So this is Huddersfield, where the story begins, and I'm here to meet Professor Tony Collins at the George Hotel, the birthplace of rugby league. Tony, great to meet you.
Hi.
This is it?
This is it, the most historic building in rugby.
Wow, let's take a look. The leading northern clubs suggested a system of payments to compensate the player for taking time off work, called broken time. But the RFU were having none of it. The northern clubs felt they had no alternative but to break away from their middle-class masters. Well, Tony, the George Hotel has seen better days, I think, but this room is really significant in the story of rugby, isn't it?
Absolutely. This is the room where we think that the 21 clubs, the leading northern clubs, met in 1895 to break away and form the Northern Rugby Football Union. They'd basically come to the conclusion that they could no longer continue to play rugby under the Rugby Union's amateur regulations. And so the teams met here at 6:30 on a Thursday night, 29th of August 1895, and decided that they would form a brand new rugby organisation, the Northern Rugby Football Union, which we today know as the Rugby League, and they would pay players 6 shillings broken time payments to compensate them for taking time off work. So rugby in this room changed forever on that night.
A seismic move for sport, and I can kind of feel the ghosts of the Great Split here, I think. As the game split, the battle lines were drawn. The industrial working class in the north and the establishment elite of the south. The Welsh Rugby Union were caught in the crossfire. Should they join their working class counterparts in the north of England or stay with the middle class RFU in the south? If this was a class war between two games, why didn't Wales align itself to its working class brothers in the north?
The leaders, very influential men heading the Welsh Rugby Union, they want to make it and keep it a national game. And if they allowed professionalism, they would immediately, they knew, be excommunicated by the other countries, and it would become immediately then a regional game. They couldn't play the other countries. They'd be forced then just to play Yorkshire or Lancashire. So the whole nature of the game would lose its authority and lose its status within Wales.
The real reason, I think, why Wales didn't go over to and leave the Rugby Union and join the Northern Union was because it was actually, not only was it a very working class game, but it was also a very cross-class game. It encompassed all the classes in Wales, and that was one of the things that the Welsh games are very proud of. A significant portion of the game was the Welsh middle classes, privately educated people had been to Llandovery, Lampeter and other private schools in Wales. And that meant that they were linked to the English Rugby Union in a way that many of the northern clubs weren't. The leadership of Welsh Rugby decided to defer to the English.
Defer to the English and play for nothing? Seriously?
It's not the done thing, old boy, to play sport for money. You play for the love of the game, recreational purposes. And I always used to think as a kid, look, if you had a talent as a musician, what are you going to do? Play at the Albert Hall for nothing? You know, if you were a brain surgeon, save somebody's life and you don't get paid for it, well, what's wrong at actually earning money at the one talent you have to provide you and your family with a decent standard of living?
This kind of compromise emerged whereby Wales pretended not to pay players and the English Rugby Union pretended to believe them. And that lasted for another 100 years.
Hypocrisy was rife. I mean, a good league friend of mine, he said, you know the difference between a rugby league player and a rugby union player? I said, no, go on, tell me. He said, rugby league players pay tax, which kind of summed it up.
Welsh Rugby has always produced great players, and the Northern Union clubs recognise the rich seam of rugby talent in South Wales. Right from the start, they came down to poach our star players. But there wasn't always a warm welcome in the hillsides for the English Scouts.
In 1897, there are 2 scouts holed up in a hotel in Llwyn Pier, and they are dragged out and frog marched to the station. There's an agent from Wigan in Penarth. He's taken down the landing stage, thrown into the sea, rolled in the sand.
Those scouts were chasing the very best Welsh players. One of their targets was William O'Neill, a Welsh international, a member of the famous Cardiff team of 1905 who became known as the Invincibles. I'm here to meet Billy's descendants and discover what made him switch. Well, Colin, Dennis, I am so excited to see this picture because this is a superstar team in a golden era for Welsh Rugby. And I'm looking at some of the names here I recognise: Gwyn Nichols, Percy Bush, Rhys Gabe. And your great-grandfather, Billy O'Neill, was part of the team.
Smack in the middle, yeah.
Amazing. He must have been a special player.
Yeah, played 11 times for Wales Union. His first Triple Crown was for the seasons of 1905. Then he was part of the 1908 Grand Slam.
So with all that going on for him in the Union game, why did he go north?
I think when he wasn't selected for New Zealand, he was known as Wales's most brilliant forward. And I think when he got left out of that, I think he was disappointed.
Billy's parents had come over from Ireland during the Great Famine. Bound for America, their boat sank, so they ended up in Milford Haven. Uncomfortable as it is to hear, their son's Irish heritage may have kept Billy out of the Welsh side for their biggest games. The WRU even insisted on him dropping the O from his name to appear less Irish. So do you think he was discriminated against because he was of Irish descent?
I do indeed. My grandfather always said they wanted an all-Welsh team, so...
They said that in the papers. And I know when he got picked for one international, one of the selectors said to him, "Oh, congratulations, Billy, on being picked for Saturday." He said, "No," he said, "I see W. O'Neill in the paper. My name's William O'Neill."
It's still shocking today to hear of the discrimination that Billy faced. And understandably, when Warrington offered him £100 in 1908 to switch codes, the Cardiff docker left with a heavy heart. I've got mixed emotions after meeting the O'Neills. I thought rugby in Wales is a classless game. I thought Cardiff in the 1900s is this inclusive melting pot. And yet here's Billy O'Neill, asked to drop the O from his name, deny your Irish heritage if you want to be part of this pure Welsh team. But you know, the wonderful thing is that he lives on in the memorabilia of the O'Neill family. He lives on in their stories, and he lives on in their hearts. After the First World War, Britain was plunged into the Great Depression. For the first time, there was mass unemployment. For many players in Wales, switching to rugby league offered them their only chance to put food on the table.
The interwar years were a period of great economic, financial strife, particularly for working class people in industrial areas. It was bad in the north of England, it was bad in Scotland, and it was especially bad in South Wales.
You know, it is surprising that more men really didn't go north. 70 Welsh internationals went north in the 1920s and 30s, between the two world wars. 70 Welsh internationals, perhaps 900 uncapped players who go north. Is it any surprise that Wales doesn't win the Triple Crown between 1911 and 1950? And these are just grim years indeed for Welsh rugby.
It strikes me that every time there's a mass exodus of players away from Wales, our national side suffers. But that's only half the story. There's another national side. Our boys don't stop being passionate Welshmen just because they've moved to England. They still play internationals in rugby league. And Wales have been pretty good at it too. I want to know more about the Wales Rugby League side and some of the men that brought it success. So where would you go to find out about Welsh rugby? Well, Huddersfield, of course. I've been given special access to the Rugby League archives at the University of Huddersfield, where there's a treasure trove of artefacts, both digital and in more traditional form, going right back to the creation of the sport. I discover a wealth of Welsh stories I've never heard back home. Now, from what I know about Welsh Rugby Union in the 1930s, it wasn't a particularly good time. But for Welsh Rugby League, it was a golden era. I've got Jim Sullivan's archive here. He's the Welsh player who was at the heart of that team. They won 3 European Championships on the bounce in the 1930s. And here is Jim Sullivan's shirt from 1937. And it's still got the mud on it. Look at this. It's this Welsh shirt. Now, number 1, of course, in rugby league is fullback, not prop. I think it must have shrunk a bit over the years, because I think it fit me, but just to handle this belonged to Jim Sullivan, and I can't stress enough what a big name he is up north. Jim had served an apprenticeship as a boilermaker while playing for Cardiff. In his union career, he'd been the youngest player to be invited to play for the Barbarians, only 26 days after his 17th birthday. And he'd even represented Wales at baseball, before deciding to make the switch and sign for Wigan, where he's still revered to this day.
Jim Sullivan played 774 games for Wigan. All first-team games, no substitutes in that time. Scored 2,317 goals. 4,883 points. Complete significant records. The appearances, the goals and the points are still club records to this day. You've had the likes of Andy Farrell, Pat Richards, Fran Abotica, Colin Tyra, all significant kickers and point scorers in the day, and never reached anywhere near what Jim Sullivan did. He was influential in winning the first Challenge Cup that Wigan ever won in 1923. He was the first captain ever to lift the Challenge Cup at Wembley in 1929, scored the first points. Will we ever see the likes of them again in a rugby league shirt? Probably not.
When he hung up those prolific boots in 1946, Jim began another career and became one of the most successful coaches the game has ever seen.
He was supreme. He would be in the top 3 of all-time players and coaches. I mean, he made his name initially with Wigan, and then he came to St Helens as the coach, and he absolutely revitalised the St Helens. He made the St Helens club. When he came, he completely changed everything around. He changed the training. He brought in players, and to me, that was the beginning of the really great history of the St Helens club.
Players like Jim Sullivan are idolised in the north of England, but as a girl growing up in the South Wales valleys, I just never got to hear about them. As soon as players switched codes, they were ostracised by their communities. The decision to go pro must have been really tough for these players, because once they'd made that decision, that was it. They were banned for life from having anything to do with rugby union at any level. Just imagine that. Once you were gone, there was no turning back. That was it.
In many cases, they weren't even allowed back in their old clubhouses. And you can talk to a lot of old players who they'd signed for a rugby league club, went back, and they went in the clubhouse and they were tapped on the shoulder to say, you're not welcome here anymore, or they couldn't even get in the door. You have to say, it's really very vicious.
You'd gone north, you were beyond the pale, and they were treated abominably. Probably the most glaring example is George Parsons. George was a policeman in Pontypool, second row forward, playing for Wales against France in Paris in 1947. Gets on the train at Newport. There's a bit of a delay. He is, well, figuratively speaking, thrown off the train. Why? On suspicion of having talked to a rugby league scout. Quite apart from human rights, it's what about human dignity? I mean, how can you treat a person like that? Purely on suspicion.
The great irony of the game was that you could play professional football and play rugby union. You could play professional cricket and play rugby union. You just could not play rugby league. The whole thing just had no foundation at all. It was something that they believed in, this purity of the amateur, even though they were slipping a few bob into people's shoes, and that was how it was.
The rugby unions had laws which stated that even if you were suspected of talking to anyone involved in rugby league, let alone setting foot on a pitch, you would have a life ban.
It was the most stupid law ever. And it happened when I was on the union. I can't get away from it. It did, because all unions in the world carried it out. Why, I don't know. It was certainly may have been a deterrent. I cannot even speak to a player, really. And I found that very sad, and still do.
I found some amazing things here. There's so much Welsh interest. Starting with this is the programme from the Challenge Cup final, May the 4th, 1935, Huddersfield v Castleford. 6 Welshmen in the Huddersfield side, 1 on the bench. Moving forward 2 more years, Keighley versus Widnes, Challenge Cup final, and there are actually 7 Welshmen for Keighley. That's more than half the team. And a player who features in both these finals is Idris Towell. He's a centre from Bridgend. I've actually got his shirt here. And what's particularly special about it, the red of Wales, Keighley, in the honour of the number of Welsh players turning out for them that day, turned their kit from green to red. And what's special as well, here in Huddersfield, a long way from Bridgend, the entire rugby journey of Idris Towell is here, right back to the very beginning. We've got his first schoolboy rugby cap for Wales. Look at that. During my travels, I've been learning of Welsh players who've made a huge success of their lives in the north, and I'm embarrassed to say I hadn't even heard of many of them before. But there's one legendary player I do know of, Welsh Sports Hall of Fame inductee and Cardiff boy, Gus Risman.
One of the most outstanding players that Salford's ever had. I dare say if we erected a statue to a player at Salford, it would be for Gus Risman. I think that would be the popular choice as the club's greatest ever player, and we've had a lot of great players over the years. He had a great understanding of the game. He was a master tactician, and he just had charisma. And when he came onto the field with the red jersey, he was just like a boy's own superhero.
Another superhero making a name for himself in the 40s and 50s was Trevor Foster. I've come to Odsal Stadium, home of the Bradford Bulls, to meet his son.
Simon, good to meet you.
Welcome to Odsal Stadium.
Oh, what an amazing place it is.
Fantastic,
it's great.
Simon's dad Trevor came north to Bradford from Newport at the end of the 30s. In 1946, just after the war, he was selected to represent Great Britain in a rugby league tour of Australia and New Zealand to raise morale in the Commonwealth. The only transport available was a British Navy aircraft carrier, the HMS Indomitable. The thought of spending a whole month on a ship didn't worry a man like Trevor Foster, mind you. He and tour captain Gus Risman just saw an opportunity.
He was an army physical training instructor in the war, and Gus Risman, then captain of the tour, as they set off on the boat, said, Trevor, I want you to look after PE. My dad said, there's a huge deck here. Played deck hockey, played touch rugby. And so my dad got them fit, and when they landed in Sydney, they were genuinely fit, and the Australian guys ready for the first test. The tour was successful because it was the only tour that went out there that remained unbeaten in tests in Australia, and never since, never before.
There were 11 Welshmen on the tour. There should have been 12, but one was left behind for shocking reasons. It wasn't because he was out of form, or even because he was injured. No, Roy Francis wasn't allowed to tour Australia because he was black.
Australia operated what they called a colour bar, an apartheid, and it was felt that because this tour was so important, neither side wanted to upset the other by including someone that the Australians could have objected to.
So Roy missed out simply because of the colour of his skin. He was an accomplished league player, but it was when the man from Bryn Mawr turned his attention to coaching that he really made his mark.
Roy Francis signed for Wigan Rugby League as a 17-year-old in the late 1930s. He became arguably the greatest ever coach in the history of rugby league.
Roy was a revolutionary, he was a visionary. He'd studied in the army psychology. When he was rehabilitating people, he himself had been an army sprint champion in 1942, the fastest man in the British Army. It's safe to say that in Roy Francis, the modern rugby league coach was developed.
His achievements predate that of the other great Welsh coach of the late 20th century, Carwyn James. He introduced game plans, he introduced individual diet plans, he filmed the players so they could see what they were doing on the pitch, where they were going wrong. It's a pity that Roy Francis isn't generally regarded in the same light as Carwyn James, because these are the two giants of Welsh coaching in the late 20th century.
Roy Francis was the first black British professional coach in any sport and was clearly an innovator and pioneer. I think it's a scandal his story is barely known in Wales. He deserves to be celebrated.
Here was a black man in 1950s Britain who was accepted as a leader, as an authority figure in the game. It's difficult to think of any other part of British society where that would be the case. So Roy Francis was not just a great coach, he was a pioneer, not just for rugby, but also in society as well. And I think that the fact that he's hardly ever been heard of in Wales, I think, is a wrong that needs to be righted.
Tiger Bay is well known for being a rich melting pot of cultures. What isn't as well known, perhaps, is the fact it was a magnet for Northern Scouts. A whole host of talented Black Welsh players left Tiger Bay and headed north. One, however, stood head and shoulders above the rest.
Well, simply a star, a superstar.
Phenomenon.
Outstanding.
Legend, isn't it?
The plaudits for Tiger Bay's Billy Boston are well-deserved. Here in Wigan, Billy's imposing frame is honoured with this wonderful statue. He was a record try-scorer for Wigan, record try-scorer for Great Britain, a true icon of either code.
Brilliant with a teammate. I played about 4.5 years with him. It was magic, because in the dressing room before you go out, of course, you've got this aura at the side of you. I'm number one, he's number two, and you're looking at him, and this is a legend you're talking about.
Billy Boston. He's a very good Boston again. Still going, he's up two up. What a score. Billy Boston from Tiger Bay, Cardiff.
Billy Boston's life was celebrated last year at a charity dinner held in Cardiff, and it was great to see 83-year-old Billy at the event. But just how could this Cardiff-born rugby colossus be allowed to slip through the net at his local side?
To think that nobody running Cardiff Rugby Club said, hey, got to give this kid a chance, look at him. I mean, I've spoken to Billy Boston at length over this various times over the years, and Billy will say, well, you know, I've racked my brains for a reason why, and in the end, I just come to the conclusion they didn't like the colour of my skin.
I always wanted to play for Cardiff, but it never happened, so that's it. I don't know what it was, but they didn't seem to think that I was good enough. So they were. They made a mistake, didn't they? Not me.
Cardiff's loss was Wigan's gain, where his colour didn't seem to matter.
The race didn't come into play. The Wigan people embraced him. It was absolutely wonderful to see. And of course, when they saw him running the tries in and doing what he could do, what he was capable of, it was all the more endearing.
Billy's story is not unique. For black Welsh players in this era, the opportunities at international level were non-existent.
The reality of Welsh rugby at the time is that it's unlikely that they're going to play for the national side. And certainly when he talked to people who were involved in Welsh rugby in the 1950s, it's clear that that was an open secret. That Billy Boston may be a great player, but there's no way he would play for Wales because of the way that the Welsh team was run at the time. So there was an undertow of racism within Welsh rugby that meant that these players immediately looked to go north.
Billy has been honoured with statues in Wigan and Wembley, but there's nothing in his place of birth. And it took until 1983 for Mark Brown to become the first black player to represent Wales in rugby union. 1983. That was too late for Bhutan boy Terry Michael.
I'd have loved to have played for Cardiff, and I'd dreamt of playing for Wales, but it was never going to happen. A black man, a black boy is never going to play for Wales. Never. You can't let it, you can't let it eat at you, which it could do. So what you do the next best thing. You go north. It was totally different up here. The race didn't come into it up here. We went out and had a look around Halifax. We went into the cafe and we found something that we didn't have in Cardiff, I never had in Cardiff, was currant tea cakes, toasted currant tea cakes, and they put butter on. Oh, we used to have 3 of those every time we went into a cafe. Fabulous. But the nicest thing about it was, when you went and got served, they said, "Thank you, darling." And I went back to the table. I said, "Oi, I don't even know that you call me darling. What's all that about, I love that side of Yorkshire.
All sports are a product of their society, so it's not true to say there was no racism in rugby league. But because of the way that rugby league emerged in a sense, in rebellion against the establishment, it's a different type of culture to rugby union. And that if you were good enough to play, people didn't really care what colour skin you were because you could win the game for them.
Halifax had a history of welcoming black Welsh players. Cardiff boys Colin Dixon and Johnny Freeman became big stars at the side.
Johnny Freeman had tremendous pace. We signed him as a centre, but it quickly became apparent this athletic-looking person with tremendous pace would be better on the wing. He could sidestep. It wasn't just pace. He could beat players with sidesteps and body swerves, change of pace. He had all the attributes. He was a natural try-scorer. In season 1956-7, he broke the club try-scoring record by scoring 48 tries. He and Colin Dixon were probably the first 2 black people that I ever saw. We admired them, we looked up to them. I think everybody else was the same. They were standout figures that you wanted to see. I collected autographs as a youngster. And the first 2 that I wanted were Johnny Freeman and Colin Dixon. And I had a pen, a special pen that I used. And I looked at the pen afterwards, thought Johnny Freeman held that pen. They were heroes, star players. Well, the fact that they're in the Hall of Fame means that they'll never be forgotten.
That's as they walked out at Wembley. That was Clive's dream, to play in a Challenge Cup match at Wembley.
Cardiff-born Clive Sullivan, one of just a handful of players who played for both the sides in Hull, deadly rivals Hull FC and Hull Kingston Rovers. His widow Rosalind is justifiably proud.
He was quite shy, but he always had time for people. And I think that was one of his greatest assets. And I think that broke down a lot of barriers as well about him being black in quite a dominant white society in Hull. And he had this big, warm, friendly smile. Clive was so proud of being Welsh. And that was something new to me because as English, we're not so proud of our heritage, but the Welsh people, there's such pride amongst them, and he was really proud of being Welsh.
Clive's biggest moment didn't come in the red of Wales, but in the white of Great Britain. In 1972, he became the first black man to captain a British professional team in any sport. And in the World Cup final, he scored an absolute beauty.
Sullivan, can he go? Sullivan, can he go? I think Sullivan will go off into the field. I don't think anybody's going to catch him. I don't think anybody's going to catch him. Everybody's saying go, 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 and he goes for a try to Sullivan.
Wales hasn't realised what's been achieved in the north by the Welsh players, and I don't think it's never been celebrated at all.
A Welshman captaining the World Cup winning side and scoring in the final, surely that would create some ripples back home.
Well, wherever Welshmen go in the world, the one sport with which we're invariably associated is rugby union football, and so we make no apology by starting our look back at 1972 with this sport.
Amazingly, Clive's achievement didn't even warrant a single mention.
I think it's diabolical, really, when you think about, you know, the talent that have come up. Your Sullivans, your Bostons, your Dixons, your Freemans. And I think it's diabolical they're not recognised. It's shocking, really. They've missed the opportunity to engrace those lads. It hurts me there. Hurts me. I didn't think I'd feel that, you know, but yeah, that hurt me, though.
These days, when Hull FC play Hull Kingston Rovers in an annual pre-season friendly, they play for the Clive Sullivan Trophy. It's one of the things I've learned about rugby league that I love. They honour their heroes, black, white, Welsh, whatever. They've even named streets and roads after some of the boys who headed north and committed their futures to rugby league.
What a fantastic occasion. Two of the biggest rivals in sport coming together to contest a trophy in memory of a Welshman who united this English city. I loved every minute of that.
Rugby league is a hard game played by hard men. None harder than Cardiff's Big Jim Mills.
John Greenglass, and I think he sent somebody off. Jim Mills has been sent off.
If you don't get sent off once a year, there's something wrong, isn't there, you know?
That horrendous stamp was a low point in Jim's career in rugby league, but there were many highlights. I've come up to Widnes to meet Jim and discover how he came to switch codes in the first place.
I was in the first team. I think I was 19-year-old, and we were playing Coventry at the Cardiff Arms Park, and I was walking up Westcott Street, and I seen this chap walking towards me and seemed to be heading for me. He said, "Jim, I won't keep you long." He said, "Just will you answer a question?" I said, "What's that?" He said, "Would you be interested in playing rugby league?" And I just said, might do. That was it. The following week, big limousines outside the house, and directors of Halifax asked me to go north. They offered me £4,000 to go to Halifax, you know. And at the time, I wasn't working because I'd lost my job. It was a lot of money then because I could buy a couple of houses in Halifax for £4,000. So it was, you know, good money, especially when you're unemployed.
The boys from Wales got big money to switch allegiance, but it wasn't a level playing field for the local English lads who'd grown up playing league. There was no tax-free signing-on fee for them, and they were often bitter about it.
These rugby union lads, they come up here. They get fantastic signing-on fees. They get pushed in everywhere. As soon as they come up, somebody else has to move out of position for them, and they don't always make it. And they come up here, I'm sure, some of them just come up here for holiday. They think, well, I can get 6,000 quid, and if I don't make it, I go back home with £6,000 in the bank.
But for Welsh players making the switch, it was no picnic. With 13 players on the pitch rather than 15, there was more space. No line-outs led to fewer stoppages. This made the game faster and arguably more physical. So for a union player switching codes, there was a big risk it might not work out.
When you come up and you've never played the game and you're picking up thousands of pounds, they all want to knock your head off, you know.
A lot of them don't expect the knocks what they're going to get, and when they do start getting them, they don't want to know about it.
The men who ran rugby league knew that money talks, but they were also sharp enough to know when it was the right time to approach a player.
We find them, for instance, when they're just getting married, that's a good time because they want a house, and they're probably labourers in some cases.
You get all walks of life,
ordinary people, and we can say to them, well, all right, we're prepared to give you so much money to sign, cash money, there's no tax from it or anything, it's on the basis of relinquishing their amateur status. It's usually a working class type of fellow that shall I say, takes the bait or makes the right decision.
And I think the only people that we leave alone, we don't, seriously. When the people are going to Cambridge, Oxford and Cambridge, we always say, well, that's something out of our, there's no chance of getting these boys, so we just leave them alone.
One superstar who did succumb to league's advances was Nathan Llanelli's Lewis Jones. A British Lion while still a teenager, the stellar fullback was a golden boy of the Welsh game. It was a seismic story in 1952 when he turned, shaking Welsh Rugby Union to its core.
One of the people who were involved in his capture was the team manager of Leeds at the time, Ken Dolby. And he wrote an account in one of his books about the capture of Lewis, which I think sums up, obviously, what it meant, but also the chase, the thrill of the chase. What a trail we blazed as we set off by road, bonfire after bonfire receding into the distance as we sped through the night, before pulling up at Journey's End in Gorsinan's Upper Lime Street. A record £6,000 fee, the all-important signature, handshakes all round, and the deal was done within the hour. Back we drove once more through the night, threading our way through valleys clad in Bible-black darkness, as if already in mourning over the loss of one of their favourite sons.
Rugby league didn't always get their man. They tried, but some Welsh players were just not for turning.
Creative and charismatic, Cliff Morgan was at the heart of the Welsh team that famously beat the All Blacks in 1953. So it was inevitable he'd be a target for the league scouts.
People arrived from Wigan and Leeds, and on a Sunday morning, a Rolls-Royce car outside the front door of a terraced house in Wales isn't a commonplace thing, so everybody knew they were there to talk rugby league terms with me. Strictly speaking, I then became a professional, because one is not allowed to discuss or negotiate. But as my mother said, when I said, look, I mustn't talk with them, ma'am, because I'd have to give up my amateur status. My mother said, well, you can't leave them on the doorstep, bring them in. And my mother used to cook food. Thank lots of people came down not to buy me, but to get ham and chips from my mother.
Cliff was wanted. He was wanted by many clubs, St Helens in particular, who really set their stall out for him. And my word, he would have been something special. He came up to St Helens, had words with them. The terms were okay, the terms were fine, and he was going to sign. But he went back to see his dad. Cliff caught the train, and the train he had to change at Crewe Station. He got off at Crewe Station, waited for the train, it was half an hour. He went for a cup of tea and he sat there, and he lost his nerve. As he said, he lost his nerve. Because if you remember, in those days, you couldn't play anywhere else. If you just went on a field for 10 minutes in rugby league, you were banned from rugby union. And Cliff said all that went through his mind, and he turned round and he caught the train down back to Cardiff.
For players who were really in the spotlight in Wales, it was very difficult for them to switch to rugby because their entire lives were there. Their celebrity, their fame, their standing in the community, just like players in the north of England, was very much wrapped up in the fact they played for the Welsh national team and they were someone that everybody knew.
You'll be banished to hell, you'll never be forgiven, you'll be walking down the road with your collar up. Nobody want to know you.
Gareth Edwards and Barry John were the superstars of their day. They were both big targets for the scouts from the north, and there's evidence in the St Helens club minutes that shows just how much their signatures were desired.
22nd of the 8th, 1967. It was reported that contact had been made with Barry John, the Wales standoff half, and we were now awaiting word from him. Minutes of directors' meeting held Friday, 27th of the 9th, 1968. The chairman reported that the meeting had been called following a phone call from Barry John, British Lions, Wales and Cardiff standoff half. John was now prepared to listen to an offer to turn professional.
When that big flashy car parked outside your house or parked outside your place of employment, the fear of God went into you. Oh, my word, this is it. You can't escape this. You're going to be offered a sum of money. Are you going to say yes or no?
This is from August 1968. A report was given, it being stated that Edward was keen to complete his studies before turning professional. It was agreed that little more could be done at this stage, but that the player be kept in contact in an effort to reach some form of agreement for the future.
And I would have been about 21, 22 when I was being given most of these offers that I was given. I've always said, you chose the wrong time, lads. I said, I'm not married, I haven't got children, I haven't got a mortgage.
10th of the 4th, 1969. It was reported that Gareth Edwards might be prepared to turn professional on return from the tour of New Zealand. It was agreed that this was also a matter for full board discussion.
It was almost felt like as if it was a noose waiting to go around your neck, you know.
Although some big fish got off the hook, there was one huge star of that era who did take the bait. Welsh captain David Watkins.
I can well remember we went down to the Knoll to train under lights, the Welsh squad which had been chosen, and David had been chosen as captain of the squad in preparation for the international. You can imagine the gathering of the clan and the people who'd been selected as a squad and all getting excited for this big match against the All Blacks. I realised that David was still in his suit, so to speak, and he just stopped everybody. He said, lads, he said, I've got something to say to you. Unfortunately, he says, I won't be at the Hours Park, but I'd like to wish you all the best because, he said, I've just signed for Salford and I'm off. and wished us all the very best and was out through the door.
Obviously, the reason I turned professional was from a financial point of view. I think everybody has to secure themselves for life, and this was an opportunity for me to secure myself for life.
I think the publicity surrounding David Watkins' arrival at Salford is the biggest we've ever had at Salford. The media were going crazy, both TV and newspaper coverage. It was just incredible, really.
In one of his first games, he might have missed a tackle or whatever, slipped off a man and some crowd hit him with your wallet, Watkins. There was that, you know, you had to be pretty good to win over the northern audiences.
I think today people would still talk about David Watkins almost as if he's still part of the club. It's a bit like when you mention Manchester United and somebody will mention George Best. It's the same with Salford. People, if they're going to recall the name of any player, it's probably going to be David Watkins.
David Watkins' world record fee of $16,000 in 1967 didn't tempt many players to follow him north. The success we enjoyed in the 70s made sporting celebrities of the players. They were well looked after by sympathetic employers. And we've all heard that open secret about unofficial payments. So there was less need to turn professional. But as the 80s loomed, everything changed. Brace yourself.
This storm is coming like a ghost town. All the clubs are being closed down.
Wales suffered as industrial decline, mass unemployment and the miners' strike took their toll. The desperation of the country was mirrored on the pitch. These weren't good times for the Union game.
Too much fighting on the dance floor.
One of the first from this era to switch codes was Swansea-born Clive Griffiths. Although the Llanelli fullback was breaking into the Welsh Union side, the money on the table from St Helens proved too much to ignore.
Only 27,000 is a lot of money these days. But you can imagine it was back in 1979 when, you know, you don't own your own house. And you got to park your car at the top of the hill every morning. The bump started. I had an offer, really, that was going up and up and up, and I couldn't refuse.
For Clive, it quickly became apparent that even though it was almost 85 years since the first Welshman had turned professional, there was still a huge stigma in his homeland.
I knew that the fallout from becoming a rugby league player was going to be immense. It was life-changing, and literally life-changing. It was people who would say hello to you in the street wouldn't say hello to you anymore. You just became an outcast of Welsh society in many people's eyes. We'd struck off the Welsh coaches register. I was a qualified coach as well at the time, so we'd struck off that.
Clive wrote to the WRU after he turned professional, and the response showed a typical lack of empathy. Unfortunately, due to your league connections, I have to advise you that you will not be retained on the WRU coaches register, and that, therefore, means we are not able to help you with any rugby football information whatsoever. As they say in Gwent, Clive, c'est la vie.
It was akin to rugby apartheid, to be honest. At the time, I'm not over-exaggerating. You were looked as a defector as well. I mean, that's a horrible way of describing it. And to me, even now, thank goodness that it has moved on a bit, but I feel very disappointed now people could behave in that way, and I think it's a shoddy part of our Welsh rugby history, of how they treated players who went north.
The 80s and early 90s saw the floodgates open once again. There was a virtual stampede north. One name was bigger than the rest. Welsh captain Jonathan Davies.
But I never wanted to get paid for playing. I was really enjoying my time at Llanelli. We were going exceptionally well, and I was enjoying it with Wales. I enjoyed playing for Wales so much. You know, the occasion, you know, everyone that had ever been involved in your career would come and watch you and be proud of you, and you'd be proud of, you know, your performances. And playing for Wales was, you know, I dreamt of as a kid.
Jonathan was captain of Wales in 1988 when Romania shocked the home side, winning in Cardiff 15-9.
National disaster, wasn't it? And, you know, it was a massive disappointment for me, you know, as a player, but even more so as a captain. You know, to lose to Romania was huge.
Disappointment for Wales, a really embarrassing defeat.
Obviously, there was the threat of me being dropped for the Six Nations, one as captain, as two as a player. And I don't know if that would have happened. I still felt I was the best outside half in Wales at the time. I was playing for Scarlets and they were winning. And then, you know, I bumped into my surgeon that had a cruciate knee ligament early on in my career, and he heard the rumours and he said, I heard you thinking of going north. I said, I'm not sure. He said, you know, make the most of that knee. So that knee injury was one thing, and then I had a 6-month-old son as well. So they're all kind of all those things, you know, come into, you know, my thought process. And I turned.
Dougie Lawton was the coach at Widnes, you know, and I was a director at the time. And he said, Jimmy said, would you come down to Wales with me? I said, what for? He said, I'm going to sign Jonathan Davies. I said, I don't think so, Dougie. I said, he's captain of Wales. I said, you'll have a job signing him.
The reasons I went was purely security, you know, for my family. And obviously when I went, they said, I said the right things in the press, that I needed a new challenge. That's bullshit. I just needed security for my family. And that's the reason I went.
I was so pleased. I remember driving away from his house, and Dougie said to me, he said, well, that's great. And I said, I can't believe it, Doug. He said, let's have a drink. He said, there must be 300 pubs in Llanelli. And I said, there's a pub there. So we pulled over. Next minute, this chap walked from behind the bar. I thought I know him. And it was Norman Gale, the former Wales hooker. And he came across and he said, have you come to sign any players? I said, no, Norman. I said, we've been down to see John Waller down Buryport. I said, we're just on our way back. He said, all right. And he bought us a pint each. And he started chatting. And it was all photos of Llanelli, who Jonathan played for around the wall, you know. I said, are you anything to do with Llanelli, Norman? He said, I'm chairman of Llanelli. And I said, I don't believe this, Dougie. I said, there's all these pubs down here, and we walked in the chairman of Llanelli's. I said, imagine him now when he picks the paper up tomorrow. We've signed Jonathan Davies, and he's bought us a pint.
For Jonathan, switching to a game he hadn't even watched before was a big step. For the opposition players, it was a chance to get one over on our golden boy.
Yeah, it was brutal. A couple of instances where I've had, you know, my eye gouged and, you know, top digit of the finger inside my eye. I've had short arm tackles, stood in my hand and all that. But hey, you know, people are surprised when I gave it back. You know, not coming from, you know, a West Wales background and playing in the West Wales League. A kind of peripheral vision is something you grow up with.
Jonathan also helped persuade other Welshmen to turn pro.
Good stuff now from Widnes. Superb rugby all across the line. Courier, the long ball to John Devereux. He's going back corner. Richard Gay's there. And the power of Devereux does it.
I had a phone call out of the blue from Jonathan. He was in Widnes, obviously been there for 6 or 7 months, and he said, look, Widnes are interested in signing you. Will you speak to them? They wanted to come to meet me, so I agreed to meet in a hotel just up the road. But I said, look, when you come down, I'm an amateur. I can't afford to be seen talking to any rugby league, you know, scouts or coaches, and you know, I'll be sign died. And so I said, can we just be discreet? And I always remember meeting them at the hotel with my dad. They turned up in this car, Nissan Bluebird, with witness car sales over every panel of the car. And they walked out of the car with the witness blazers on. And yeah, I just thought that was pretty discreet, that was, yeah.
Everybody's story of going north is different, but perhaps the most unusual tale concerns a maverick scrum half who played for Pontypool, had 1 cap for Wales, and ended up in Hull Kingston Rovers after a spell at Her Majesty's pleasure.
David Bishop was playing for Pontypool against Newbridge in October 1985 when he was involved in an off-the-ball incident with Chris Jarman, who then brought a private prosecution against Bishop for common assault.
I pleaded guilty to the common assault, and he gave me a month in jail. And I said to put it to my solicitor, I said, what am I going to do? I'm meeting Kate, my wife, for luncheon. And that's what happened. They sent me over. I went to jail.
After spending a night in Cardiff prison, where the governor even asked for his autograph, Bishop was released to take his case to appeal. At the appeal court, he was given a suspended sentence. The WRU took a dim view of David's brush with the law.
And then they decided in their wisdom to ban me for 10 months to keep me out of the first World Cup. It keeps getting reported it was a broken jaw, it wasn't. It was just, you know, he was chucking his weight about, and I give him a clip. And that was it, really. A kid's 6'4", and he goes crying. So, there you are.
After the ban, Bish was back playing for his beloved Pontypool, and in a 5th-round cup game, he put in a match-winning performance.
Look at that joy from David Bishop. With his all-round performance, he must surely have impressed the 2 selectors, R.H. Williams and Derek Grinnell.
After the game, Pontypool's coach, Ray Prosser, went to see the Welsh team selectors who'd been watching the match.
Ray went up and he said to a couple of the Welsh selectors, how can you not pick him? And they turned around and said, well, we're in charge. You'll never play for Wales again. And that was it. I thought if I can't play for my country again, I've got to start to get something out of it. And that was it, really. You know, you don't mind leaving a house, but when you're kicked out, it's different.
With no international future in union for David, he decided to take a £50,000 offer from Hull Kingston Rovers and moved north.
Such a culture shock when you go up there, because I was fit, but I mean, not fit for this game. And for 4 games, I just got battered. They just battered me. I remember the first tackle I took, broke my nose and loosened a couple of teeth. And I thought, hello, and they were all saying, welcome to Rugby League. In the second half then, I torn all the ligaments in my ankle. I remember coming off between the 2 physios and all the Salford chanting, what a waste of money. What a waste of money. And I was fortunate then, you know, just after I went and all the Welsh stars started to go there with Moriarty, Hadley, Roland Phillips, Devereux. And they sort of regenerated then the Rugby League side. So it was like the boys coming back home, if you like. But it'll never, ever replace what I lost. You know, I'm still bitter about it, but there you are. You know, probably died bitter about it, but nothing can be changed now.
The effect on the Welsh Rugby Union side of so many players heading north was devastating. Between 1989 and 95, we finished bottom of the table 5 times.
To lose him was a big blow for Welsh rugby, certainly. The other countries didn't lose him like that, right? And if they lost him in New Zealand, they went to Tonga and Fiji and picked him up instead. So it was a strange situation to have, but I don't blame him one iota. If you have got talent, and whatever you got your talent in, if you can make money on it as well, all the best to you, I say.
And in the 80s, there was an additional attraction to turning professional. Thanks to so many players moving north, Wales's international league side was once again a force to be reckoned with.
We were very passionate. Everyone was a very passionate Welshman, and we wanted to wear that red jersey again. And maybe, you know, Welsh Rugby Union wasn't going very well, so we had the opportunity to, you know, make a little bit of an impression.
The chance to make that impression came in 1995 on the biggest stage of all, when Wales co-hosted the Rugby League World Cup.
Every game is a special memory. You know, we had to delay the kick-off at Ninian Park for the first game against France, and the crunch game against Samoa at the Vetch. Well, going back down towards Penclough and going down to the Veg to play a game of rugby league where I used to go watch the Swans as a kid and so forth, and to hear there's 2,000 people locked out was amazing.
People still come up to me and say, "Oh, what a game that was!" You know, I was captain. My boy Scott was the mascot, and the whole occasion was fantastic. And it was a brutal game, amazing atmosphere. But it just embraced what we were all about as players and as individuals. We wanted to win that game. We weren't prepared to lose it. Coming in Swansea.
Wales had a fantastic World Cup, reaching the semi-final where they eventually lost to England.
It was a unique time in Welsh sport, but for Welsh Rugby League it was the golden era of Welsh Rugby League.
You know, playing for Wales and playing for Great Britain with Widnes was special, because I thought going to rugby league that I would lose that international arena, and it's not the same as the international arena of rugby union, of course. You know, they're far greater, but to play in Wembley was just fantastic.
It was at Wembley, playing for Great Britain, that Jonathan's biggest moment in rugby league was secured.
I've been very lucky. I've scored most of my best tries on television, which is useful. I had a pass off Dennis Betts and just looked around. They had a slight dog-leg defence who had done me and all, and it opened up. And I knew I was going to score 10 yards out from scoring it. But yeah, it was very special to score in an Ashes match at Wembley against maybe the greatest sides in the world.
Betts to Davies. Davies, he's got some space. He's going for the corner. He's got his head back, and the Welshman is in for a magnificent try at the corner.
Probably the most gifted rugby player of either code anywhere in the world of his generation. Jonathan had this beauty when he ran with the ball. He was so natural, lithe, and it was just a pleasure to watch. There was an aesthetic quality to watching Jonathan Davies that I think was only really brought out in rugby league.
The mass exodus of star Welsh players that had lasted for 100 years was coming to a close. By the mid-90s, rugby's governing body had come to accept the inevitable. The Southern Hemisphere sides had been professional in all but name for some time. Money was pouring into the game after the Rugby Union World Cup, and the amateur days were about to come to an abrupt end. On the 26th of August 1995, the International Rugby Board declared rugby union an open game. This meant union players could be openly paid for playing. There was no need to go north anymore. Players still leave Wales, of course, but these days they're more likely to disappear through the Channel Tunnel than head up the M6. And the players who make the move to France don't get shunned or vilified like the Welshmen who went to league. They became outcasts in Wales, but heroes in the north.
Without the Welsh players, rugby league would not be what it is today. The contribution that they made on the pitch, as players, as coaches, and the contribution they made to the game off the pitch and to the communities that they lived in as well, because many of them stayed in the north and became icons. Rugby league's unthinkable without the contribution of those Welsh players.
I have to admit, I grew up believing rugby league was the enemy, the code that stole my heroes and decimated my Welsh team. But my perception has changed. It's a bigger story that transcends sport, where race and class have played their part. And ultimately, how can you begrudge any player who just wants to provide for his family by doing the thing he loves? Here in Wales, we ostracise many of those men and have chosen to largely ignore their success. The English, however, embraced them, celebrated their achievements and hold them in their hearts to this very day. And we as a nation would be richer for it if we made up for lost time and did the same.
The wild diversity of Borneo in all its astonishing tropical beauty next tonight.